This is Ann the Raven, live in studio from 88.5 to SoCal Sound to Music You Can See. We've got one of the artists that's going to be performing at Ann the Raven's birthday party, Steve Fedor.
Hi, Annie.
How you doing, Steve? It's so nice to have you here. It's so nice that you're going to be doing the party. You're one of the ones that I have heard, and I think you are great.
Oh, well, flattery will get you
Always
everywhere.
have. So tell me a little bit about Steve and what's going on.
Well, I grew up in the 50s, mostly in LA, listening to, the artists of the day, Elvis Presley, the Everly Brothers, and Bill Haley. That's what they played mostly on the white rock and roll stations. And a little Chuck Berry crossed over a bit, and you'd hear the Coasters, And then what happened was when the Beatles came along, the British invasion and all that stuff. By then, I was a teenager, and I did my musical taste was already formed, and I just hated that stuff. I thought it was the silliest music I ever heard, and I needed something else to listen to, so I started listening to KGFJ, the black station in LA, and they, Hunter Hancock, and they played old, doo-wop and blues and R&B, and I just became a nut for that kind of music, and particularly when I heard Joe Turner do the original version of Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Because on the white stations, you always heard Bill Haley do it.
Yeah.
And but Joe was, that was it for me. And then the first blues record, I think I heard Straight Ahead Blues record around that time, about 1964. Lowell Fulson had a record out called Black Nights, which was just a terrific record. And I never thought in a million years I would go on to someday play with both Lowell Fulson and Joe Turner.
I've met him, yeah.
And I did, and many others like them. And at that time, I didn't even really play music. I had some piano lessons when I was young, but I hated it. I wanted to play baseball, not piano. But my parents wanted me to learn to play piano because...
But you're so great at it.
Well, my dad had been a professional piano player and songwriter. He played all over Hollywood in the late 30s and early 40s. And he also, he wrote songs for films and celebrities, and he had a recording studio on Sunset that eventually morphed into one of LA's first bebop record labels, which was called Melodisc. Their artists were like Slim Gaylord, Jack McVeigh, King Perry, Marian Abernathy. Howard McGhee, who introduced bebop to the West Coast, recorded for them. And he also was a columnist for Key Magazine, Entertainment. And so he had a lot of connections, and he was doing pretty well until he got drafted into World War II and was away for 3 years, and that kind of put the end to his music career. And so he was always bitter about that and the struggles he had, getting somewhere in that business. And so even though they wanted me to learn to play piano because, music was in the family, but he always did everything he could to terrorize me about becoming a musician. And so they pointed me in a different direction. They sent me off to college. And, I never wanted to be a musician. And to this day, I never thought of having a career really as a musician. But in college, I met a friend of mine, Tom Jacobson, and he had an album of the old-time boogie-woogie piano players like Pete Johnson, Albert Ammons, Meat-Lux Lewis. And I was just mesmerized by Pete Johnson in particular. And so instead of going to class, unbeknownst to my parents, I'd spend all my time down in the practice rooms in the music building where they had pianos, and I was able to exploit the few lessons I had when I was younger, and I was able to teach myself, this type of music, boogie woogie and blues to some extent, and by the time I got out of college, I was actually fairly decent. I mean, I wasn't great, but when I got back to LA, and this was probably about 1971. I got a call and was asked to join a band. It was the first band I ever played with. It was formed by Elliot Ingber, who was Frank Zappa's guitar player in the Mothers of Invention. Mm-hmm. In fact, Elliot just passed away a few weeks ago, actually. But and we rehearsed in a garage in Hollywood, but the band was too stoned to ever play a gig. In fact, I didn't even know the band had a name until 20 years later. But from there, at that time, a club opened in Venice called Rick's Bar in the early 70s. And Your listeners might be familiar with a place in Venice called the Comeback Inn. That was where Rick Barr was before it was the Comeback Inn. And it was a blues club, and everybody played there. You know, Joe Turner, Lowell Fulson, Pee Wee Creighton, Rod Piazza. The Blasters even played there 10 years before they were the Blasters, and Dave Alvin wasn't even full grown. He was a teenager, but Phil was older and had a band called the Night Shift, and they played in there. And it was just a great place. There was an old 78 jukebox on stage and a beat-up old piano I used to play. And it was the first time I ever played on stage with a band. It was Philip Walker's great blues band. And then one night, I remember Alberto Gianquinto, who was James Cotton's piano player, took me over to another spot in Venice where there was a band that he liked sitting in with, and by the beach. The band there was the Venice Canaligators. And so I sat in with them too, and I got friendly with them, and I ended up doing gigs with them, and stayed with them pretty much through the mid-'70s until our band leader burned down the clubhouse of the local biker gang. Yeah, one night after a gig. That led to a chain of circumstances that kind of caused me to part ways with him. And then, and by then, the late 70s, I was playing in a country bands as well, because the Canaligators also played country music. They played both blues and country, which necessitated my learning how to play country music. And I came to really love it. And I write country songs, and I played with Asleep at the Wheel, the Western Swing Band. And then the 80s came along, and I started playing with artists like Buddy Guy, Otis Rush, Junior Wells, played with Coco Taylor, John Lee.
You played with some of the biggies, I knew that.
Yeah, John Lee Hooker, Bo Diddley, Joe Turner, Lowell Fulson, Pee Wee Creighton, Percy Mayfield, Eddie Vincent, Linda Hopkins. The list just goes on. And Charlie Musselwhite and Canned Heat I played with, and it's endless. But it's been great.
Tell us about your band now.
Job Striles.
Yeah, I know Job. Yes.
Yeah, we played great together. We've got great chemistry, and Job's had a long-standing gig down in Venice at Venice Beach. There's a club called Hanano Cafe, which we refer to as Hananos. It's at the end of Washington Boulevard, and we're there the first Saturday of every month from 5:30 till 9:30. There's no cover charge, so come on down. And it's a four-piece group. We do, blues and very different styles of blues, New Orleans, R&B, and some Chuck Berry.
Now, is this in Venice?
Yeah, it's in Venice. It's being at the end of Washington Boulevard, it's right between Venice and Marina del Rey. It's sort of the southern end of Venice. That place has been there since 1962. I think it's the same sawdust on the floor. In fact, believe it or not, I actually played there 50 years ago with the Canaligators, because that was one of the places they played. So 50 years later, I'm still playing in the same place. It's unbelievable. But we play for 4 hours and have a great time there. It's kind of a wild place. Venice is a little tamer than it used to be, but it's still got a nice rowdy element to it.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for coming by.
My pleasure, Ann.
I'm excited about you playing the birthday party this year.
Well, I am too. And put another candle on the birthday cake.
Yes. I'm taking them off.
Okay.
Steve Fedor, guys. This is Steve Fedor. This has been Ann the Raven reporting live from the studio. And we've been speaking with Steve Fedor. I'm reporting for 88.5 The SoCal Sound and Music You Can See. Be there on July the 19th for Ann the Raven's birthday party at the corner of 4th and Spring.